Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Growing Gig Economy, Importance of Financial Literacy to Gig Workers. This is being held in conjunction with the Financial Literacy Month 2021, which aims to provide financial education and support during this challenging time. My name is Roshan Kanesan with Ringgit Plus Financial Planner, and I'll be your moderator today. Now, the gig economy, it's a term that I think most of us have become familiar with over the last year or so, and is typically characterized by temporary or short-term work. The people basically that take you to your next meeting or delivering your food that you just ordered 5 minutes ago. And with this more fluid and flexible form of income generation comes a new form of labor market, which has generally been criticized for not providing enough social protection. So the big question for today and moving forward is, what can we do about it and how do we move forward? Today, we discuss and explore this with Mr. Sean Goh, Country Head of Grab Malaysia, Ms. Francesca Chia, CEO and co-founder of GoGet, and Mr. John Riba, Deputy CEO at Perkeso di Pertubuhan Keselamatan Sosial. To the three of you, a very good morning and welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, no worries. It's in this new norm, it's always got that the little bit of social graces you have in that good morning is not as natural, but I think we survived. So moving on into basically, let's just get into the main topic at hand here, right? And there's a lot we can talk about the gig economy, about platform work and where it's going to go forward. But let's start a little bit about some of the, I guess, the key concerns on the ground floor level here, right? So there was a report in December 2020 by UNCDF that found that while flexibility of hours and extra source of funds were top reasons in Malaysia for gig economy participation, they also found that the uncertain income outlook was a primary concern. With that in mind, and given the lack of financial literacy that we generally talk about here in Malaysia, and is, I guess, part of why we're doing this entire event over the last month, is that, is financial education enough to help gig workers with their finances, or do platforms and policymakers need to take a more active role here, particularly with social protection measures? Now, this question is open to all three of you. Would anyone like to take a stab at it first? No volunteers?
Sure, I will go first then. Yeah, I think that's a great introduction, and thank you so much for having us here. It is such an important topic for us, at least in GoGet, especially because we are that platform that connects people to part-timers, and also part-timers then connect to what we call jobs that are flexible. And you're right, with every job then comes income. And what do we do with that? Do we only just provide education, or do we do more? At GoGet, we believe really in thinking about it comprehensively as an entire ecosystem. Actually, one of our words that we use in our vision is actually to bring flexible work to the world sustainably. And the key word here is sustainably. What we mean by that is, genuinely, we believe that if we want to think sustainably, which means long-term, and if you want to be treated as a long-term solution and as a serious option, we need to be able to ensure that people get very similar benefits to full-time jobs, but instead of full-time, of course, it's on demand. Now, I think your question was really, do you do more than just education? I think the short answer is yes. We do in GoGet, obviously, education, and we've teamed up with players such as UNCDF or PIDM as well, that does financial literacy. And we conduct also basic financial literacy in-house education that we create the content and we push it out as well. But what we do find as a platform player, the key role is also to provide financial access. So education is one, but financial tools or support in terms of access to them is very important. For example, since we started in GoGet, we've also created insurance, basic insurance for all our Go-Getters. We recently teamed up with UNCDF to push out on-demand savings for our Go-Getters, so they can click and save as low as 1 cent. But now what's great, since Panjana Gig has been rolled out, we also have partnership with SOXO to provide social security to the Go-Getters with a click of a button. But also at the same time, we're in talks for working with the pension fund of Malaysia as well to ensure that they get that. So I think access and easy access is important. Like anything, it's almost the equivalent of making sure banks have branches everywhere so that people can get access to finances, and that the branch teller is easy to understand to get someone their tools. We need to do the same thing, but through our apps.
Francisca, that's such an important point, because we can have all the tools in the world, but if there's no access or a lack of easy access to it, it can be, as good as not having the tools at all. And I'm glad to hear, and we've been hearing a lot of this over the last year, where the pension fund, EPF, so everyone is adapting to this more fluid style, because it's not something that's going to go away. It's something that's going to be around for a long time coming, I think, especially as flexibility becomes a bit more high value going forward. But of course, I would like to take this over to Mr. John for your thoughts on this, right? How active, I guess, the question here as an introductory factor is, how active should policymakers be on this in the gig economy? Because, in the formal economy or formal jobs, you've got EPF, you've got SOC, so it's already inbuilt into our to our wages and taken out. How active do you think we need to be in terms of the gig economy?
Thank you, Roshan. Pleasure to be with everyone here. There are three tiers when thinking about social protection. First layer is our social welfare system. Second layer is our social insurance system. And third layer is private insurance. Under the second layer of protection, Perkeso provides replacement of income and productivity to 7.2 million formal workers, or 8.7 million including foreign workers, in the event of work injury, invalidity, loss of employment, and even death. These benefits also include employment services, including rehabilitation, case management, career counseling, and job matching services under the Return to Work program. However, the situation is much different for those in self-employment or the gig economy, since they do not have an employer-employee relationship. Recognizing the shift of workers from formal to informal work, the Ministry of Human Resources has established the Self-Employment Social Security Act in 2007, or what we call it Act 789 in 2007, with the purpose to provide protection to self-employed workers against work injury. Despite efforts to organize over 9,166 engagement sessions across Perkeso networks of 54 offices across the country, our coverage rate remains only at 12.9% of total self-employed, or about 343,000 workers. Even under the top layer of social protection or private insurance, coverage remains among the middle 40 or top 20 of the income group. Life insurance coverage rate are around 41% of the working population. Health coverage is slightly less than 33%. Over 220 accidents and disablement cases reported to Perkeso or SOCSO, but were not covered by Self-Employment Social Security Scheme. This year alone, there are more than 60 deaths recording on the e-hailing and p-hailing riders on various platforms that were not covered by Perkeso. This is hundreds of households falling into poverty within less than a year. So, as an implementing agency, I see so much room for financial education and financial literacy organization, and campaigns can improve the awareness among gig workers, especially those related to social security protection in the event of unfortunate event due to accident or death. Back to Roshan.
Mr. John, thank you for that. I think the key thing there was the stats, right? And just the number of what was it? 12.9% of only 12.9% of self-employed are currently covered or protected. Amongst the other statistics there about the number of accidents, and this can be one of those things that really makes or breaks your financial status, right? When something happens to you and you aren't protected, this is why we always talk about medical insurance or insurance in general. But Sean, before I go on a bit too long, I throw this over to you now, because I think from our previous discussions as well, I like the view that you have here, right? Because essentially it's a bit more individualistic, but also important, right? To have that flexibility. Could you please elaborate on how you think about how active platforms should be in terms of financial management of the individual?
Yeah, let me unpack a couple of key concepts when it comes to the topic of income and the broader economy as well as the gig economy, and then sort of I guess tie it back to why I think financial literacy is important. So the three concepts that keep coming up are rising cost of living, insufficient savings, and then the third one, I think, unless you're economist, you don't use as much, but underemployment in general. And the three are quite linked, right? Because when cost of living goes up, we keep thinking about how do we keep prices low, but you can't fight the market, right? What you can do is help people save. What you can help people do is fill up their time, make sure they earn well. And so, something Francesca mentioned is access, right? And, the gig platforms and actually a lot of platforms, not just gig, is focused on the earnings side of the equation. If you think about somebody who is, for example, earning, say, 2,000, which is the median salary, and if your outgoings and your commitments are higher than 2,000, then tough luck, right? That there's no safety net beyond that. You're not going to go and hollow out your EPF savings, right? I mean, you could do that, but that's not something you can keep doing. And if you think about the ultimate safety net, the first safety net that kicks in is really the flexibility to ramp up your earnings. And that's where the platforms really come in, right? The platforms are the first safety net where you say, hey, I need 500 more this month for my commitments. Guess what? I have a bit of excess time because most of us do, i.e. I'm underemployed. I can actually work more and earn that 500. If I have a bit more excess, I can earn 1,000 and then save 500 for a rainy day, right? So that's the first layer. Now, I think why financial literacy and social protection comes in is if I'm doing really well and I'm working really hard, I can earn, our full-timers earn 4,000 or 5,000 a month. It's really good, actually, that kind of places you well above the average in the nation and basically in M40 households, if you have like 2 people working in the household. That's great. The problem is not the earnings. The earnings comes easy. I mean, not easy, sorry, it's hard work, but it's within your control. What is not within your control is the emergencies and the commitments that can come after. So then that second safety net, I think that comes after is financial planning, financial literacy, and social protection. One key concept within the self-employment, I guess, like sphere is that all this money that could have been contributed to various schemes, like whether it's SOCSO or EPF or insurance funds, all end up in the pockets of the people who are earning it. So basically, we're giving a lot of power over to the self-employed individuals to decide where to allocate that funds. And that's where the literacy comes in. I think just awareness around where to best place it.
Sean, I feel that sentiment a lot, right? I think that having control over your finances is important, but at the same time, we do see that there is a lack of that awareness, right? Because for most of I think the last 50 years or so, there's always been some kind of government agency, whether it's EPF or SOCSO, that helps fully employed workers get certain levels of protection, helps save. So there's a certain top-down element to it. But then when we enter the gig economy, it changes because that gross salary that you get, that gross income that you make, because you're essentially a self-employed person on a platform, now it's your responsibility to start doing these things, which is something that a lot of us are not used to. And this kind of, there are access to lots of tools, but that knowledge gap is not there. So in your view, how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, so 2 things, right? First, if you think about traditional employment, and back to the median example, if you earn 2,000 a month, somebody essentially says, here's how much you need to take out of that and put it into EPF and SOCSO. Now, when you get into a field like the gig economy or any self-employment, and like for us, 70–80% of our gig workers are part-time. So it could be that they already contribute, but nobody really knows that. And so it kind of, a lot of this power and responsibility is left to the individual to decide. For sure, I think the awareness is not strong enough because in some cases, maybe they don't contribute enough from their other sources of employment, and they need to be thinking of it as a portfolio. So I think that's where that conversation needs to come in. But at the same time, if we said, hey, you're already earning 2,000 fixed, plus you're earning, say, another 2,000 from the gig economy, it's a bit simplistic to also say, hey, you should contribute based on that second 2,000 that you got. So I think the individual circumstances vary, and the trick here, I mean, the tricky part here is finding that balance. How do we account for that?
Yeah, because what's essentially happening is it's a form of, I mean, if you think about it, it's modular work, right? We're entering a phase where you can add on other things. You can, if you've got a 9 to 5, you can do a 7 to 9, and then you can do a 5 to 7 thereafter to earn a bit of income. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we want to do, but I think going back to your earlier point, Sean, it's something that can be done to monetize those hours that you currently aren't already monetizing. And then the question comes to, how do you create some kind of social protection around that, right? Should it be voluntary? Should there be a top-down method to it? It's complicated because it's not as scalable as something like full-time employment is, where everyone has a certain structure in place. Francisca, I know you guys at GoGet have introduced some programs here. So I would love to hear how you have gone about it, why you've gone with these certain programs, and maybe how it's done, if you could give us some examples.
Sure, definitely. And it's very linked to actually what Sean just mentioned. I'd love to quickly build on that. I mean, I think that's 100% such a good point, which is a lot of people think it's just full-time and then it's against the part-time, or what we'll call gig work in this conversation. And most of the time, it's just the rhetoric is like, oh, you're either or. It's not an and. And that's something that firstly for the general masses of awareness education, exactly what he said. It's the same thing on GoGet. 80% of our workers actually are not full-time on GoGet. That means they are highly likely working on another source of income. And we know that for a fact. They have full-time jobs. And so very much so, we can't, with that thinking, and also then your question of how do we really build then that social protection, but for this then, and think around that, it means that we definitely can't take, we cannot assume the traditional way of social protection can be then just shoved into this new, what we'll call a new world, or modular work is a really great word that you used. It's almost trying to, we cannot do apples to apples here comparison, and it just doesn't work, right? So on our side, how we've been trying to think around this is actually to provide access, but to essentially make sure that the access still incorporates the on-demand aspect of the benefit. So not forcing a structure of that 9 to 5 that you were mentioning. It's very clear, 9 to 5 options. If you have a full-time job, the rate on EPF is 7% or 11%, and you opt for it, and the employer has to do the exact same, right? But for actually platforms like us, what I think is very important, just like how people are coming in to be flexibly working, they want to flexibly get protected. So that is so important I essentially just mirror what the nature of the job is. It's on demand. Then can you create the protection to be on demand, right? So for us, some of the examples we did at first, we tested it with savings at least. And so we have a fully integrated private savings feature where it's via APIs. So it means that for like the go-getters do not have to walk into a bank to save. They just can click with a button on the app to say, I would like to save with our partnering app. And that partnering app has an onboarding flow online. And as long as you set up your account on to that app, it starts saving, and you actually get rewards with this savings app. And then you can cash out, or you can keep going. They actually give you bonuses if you hit your target as well. And they keep their bonuses and target setting very modular as well. And they keep it very simple. Just save 100 ringgit. So it's not like a very big thing as before, right? But it can be also, you can even set your own, and what's great, for example, with this app, you set your own target, again, on-demand target setting, completely flexible, and you give that power to the individual, and they can choose, I would like to save up to 50 ringgit this week. And then the app triggers you to remind you. So these are some of the ways that we do think about how to create that in our space. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I really like the incentivization, right? Because a lot of times, and maybe it's a bit cliched now, but a gamification seems to be very powerful in these senses, right? And I mean, the concept of social media also kind of uses those likes and all these kind of things to integrate a little bit of a dopamine hit, which can be good or bad depending on what you're doing it for, I guess. Well, that's very, very interesting. And the accessibility is really important, right? You're doing it on demand and very directly. Really, really like that. Have you, I guess, in the implementation of this, because it sounds very seamless, but was it always like that? Did it start off seamless, or did it take some time to get people used to this?
Oh, it's definitely not. In fact, actually, this is also probably a great argument for why we actually would like to work with the government for this. So one, when we rolled out anything to do with income and setting aside that is very scary to a gig worker, of course, right? So when you say you're going to save it with an app called, we partner with Pod, they would say, well, what is Pod? Is it trustworthy? Is it safe? Right? So the trust factor is, especially for financial products, is super high. And that's where I was just mentioning the argument to also work with, of course, the pension fund is very, very strong, because then everyone knows EPF and everyone will not question whether it's trustworthy or not, as long as we partner with them. So that was firstly the biggest challenge at first, definitely the trust. The second one is then definitely the education. Why should I save? I'm only earning just a little bit to cover costs. And we know statistically from our data, the more you earn, then the more you will save. But if you do not earn enough, you will not even save, because you do not have enough to save, right? So there is a bare basic, and then you will save. Saving is actually counted as a luxury, of course, for a certain level of income. So so the education of, oh, but I haven't been saving this whole time, so I don't really need to, and trying to tell them, hey, please, do save for a rainy day. We've had to use ambassadors, we've had to use testimonials, and then we do actually matching funds and incentives to say, hey, save with this program, and it does help. And once you get into the habit, definitely there's a sense of habit here that it does help. And then we look at trying to ease it with automation of saying, hey, let's just set a regular pace, so you don't even need to touch it anymore, and it will just regularly save for you. So these are definitely things that that help the traction. But initially, because we didn't have any of those, it was very, very difficult to get off the ground.
Maybe
Yeah.
just to add, like on the topic of incentivizing good behaviors, John and the team at Saxo, as well as the EPF team, actually have been very proactive in doing that. Just incentivizing that little bit of extra contribution. And because it's all on an opt-in basis, we hope that once you get used to the idea of contributing some of your excess income, then during a week or a month when you actually earn more, you choose to contribute more, right? So that's a pretty good way to do it. To build awareness, you kind of have to give something back to the community. And then one more just to add to the concept of modularizing the solution is a big, big challenge. Like, Roshan, your question was like, is this difficult? Yes, very difficult. So Francesca talked about savings, one example on protection. When you're driving on the road every single day, you're exposed to various dangers, right? Including your car. Your car could be in danger, and there's a financial risk. So there's an insurance that covers all this. The problem is that the traditional insurance structure is built for people who work full-time. So you have to pay thousands to get this coverage, even if you're just working 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday. It's just really not worth it, right? So we came up, we came up against this challenge, and we said, can we make this a fractional insurance? Can we make this a daily insurance coverage? Super ambitious. All our partners told us it's ambitious. Fortunately, the insurance industry, and big thanks to Bank Negara actually for bringing everyone together and making this happen. We actually came up with the first daily insurance product that I have heard of. I don't know if it's the first in the world. And technically, it's really difficult to do because of existing regulations. But we found workarounds that are compliant, by the way, with the regulations to do this. So this kind of financial engineering is very important on top of just awareness to get the right products into the hands of the gig economy workers.
Yeah, and I guess this shows even if it's not direct policy making, entities like Bank Negara, EPF, or SOCSO have a certain well, not certain, have a large amount of heft and influence that they can use to guide policy a certain way, to influence the conversation. So, and with that, Mr. John, I would love to get your thoughts on all this as well, in terms of, we're seeing the government over the last year or so has been doing a lot more to address the plight of the self-employed, right? Because a lot of it, we focus on the fully employed workforce, but realistically speaking, the fully employed workforce is not as big as we think it is. There are a lot more self-employed people in this country than we give credit for, freelancers, gig workers. So, Mr. John, maybe you can take us through, I guess, from SOCSO's perspective, how do you go about addressing something like this? It sounds like a big hill to climb at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Roshan. Well, SOCSO recognizes the role of self-employed workers, especially the delivery and food operators who are active especially during COVID-19 pandemic. Together with the Ministry of Finance, SOCSO designed matching contribution program for social security. These are Penjana Gig under Penjana package, SPS Lindung under Belanjawan 2021 this year, and then SPS Prihatin Wanita under Pemerkasa package. Since the implementation of these programs from June 2020 until October 2021, more than 270,000 gig workers have registered with SOCSO. Government fund is allocated through matching grant for gig economy platform who contribute for the gig workers to SOCSO SESS. So the incentive under SOCSO's Penjana Gig and SPS Prihatin Wanita allows gig workers to receive SOCSO coverage for a year under Plan 2, or if you talk about contribution, is RM232.80 per month, per year, where the government contributes 70% of the contribution payment and another 30% by gig economy platforms or gig workers. This means the government contributes RM163 to our SOCSO or SESS Plan 2, while gig platform or gig workers contribute RM69.80 only. Meanwhile, the SPS Lindung program provides free or 100% contribution grant, specifically for delivery riders and public sector volunteers, with the same contribution plan or Plan 2 to promote social protection among all gig workers. So Perkeso is working with all three actors, main actors. There's the government, the platform providers like Grab Malaysia or like GoGet, and the gig workers directly. Moving forward, Perkeso SOCSO is with the government. Perkeso is building stronger legislative framework and slowly transitioning from voluntary to mandatory coverage. This one is from voluntary to mandatory coverage, especially in the transportation and logistics sector. So this one is only two sectors. Working with the Ministry of Transport, Perkeso is pursuing automatic coverage upon registration or renewal of administrative licenses. This is supported by a proposal in budget 2022 next year for the matching of full contribution schemes such as SPS Lindung, Penjana Gig, and also SPS Prihatin Wanita that is fully financed by the government as a soft landing for the implementation. Second, the gig platform providers. We have built collaborative relationship with existing gig platform providers in the areas of data sharing, ease of contribution collection, and promotion or prevention exercises. For example, some platform providers are promoting and advertising in our social protection plans under the SESS through their mobile apps. With the mobile apps, they can also act as contribution collection agents to assist gig workers in setting aside earnings from each task for purpose of social protection. And lastly, Perkeso also engages with gig workers and affiliated workers association directly. In fact, yesterday our CEO, Perkeso, has had a productive meeting with Persatuan Pengantar P-Hailing Malaysia or Pengantar to improve Perkeso social protection coverage for delivery riders. we are expanding our information and promotional network on the ground and with physical campaigns, WhatsApp or social media groups, and even prevention education or defensive riding for our gig workers. In fact, many more tripartite strategies are in the pipeline to ensure that all self-employed and gig workers are protected. These initiatives are supported with our information sharing network under the program Social Synergy. Over 190 government agencies, NGOs, workers associations are sharing information on cases related to SOCSO. At Perkeso, we believe that no one should be left behind in social security protection. Roshan, please.
So John, thank you so much for that. And it's great to hear that Perkeso is taking such an active role in this, right? And now, if you could just dive into a little bit into that a little deeper. So if I heard you correctly, you were talking about how essentially the government is going to take a more active role in terms of funding certain protections. Is that something that we can expect for a longer duration, or is that another temporary measure that's being put in place?
Okay, when we talk about gun funding, actually, first of all, we have to appreciate that the government now recognize the self-employed, they recognize about initiative to protect the self-employed. You can see with gun funding for this year, they did help even 100% in the budget and also matching grants. So to answer the question, actually, that's why we mentioned earlier that we hope that the government in budget 2022 extend the coverage for matching grants also for certain sectors or certain group of people. The government will give 100% what they call grant, yeah, coverage or contribution for them. But personally, I believe that I think this one's only maybe temporary, yeah? Maybe for the next few years, depend on the government budget or the situation, financial situation of the government. But actually, to sustain this social security protection, actually the workers themselves should know about the responsibility to themselves, to their families, that they should be protected, at least with the minimum social security coverage for themselves and the family. If in case any accident happen or death happen related to the work or whatever it is, employment injury, so at least life goes on, yeah? Life goes on for themselves and their family. So this is a very important, that's why today we discuss about financial literacy. That's why we want them to know that not only they talk about today, we know that the gig workers, they talk about, okay, hari ini bekerja untuk hari ini, for today, dan gaji untuk hari ini juga. Tapi actually, they must remember that if anything happen to them, what will happen tomorrow? Yeah. So this is very important. The contribution is very, very low. They only contribute like if they pay themselves, it's only like a few cents, maybe 40 cents per day, so 30 ringgit per month. So it is very cheap actually as compared to if you buy other things, other products. But now our job is to educate them. Actually, financially, we have to educate them on this social security protection. That's why this initiative by your side is very good actually today that we talk about this topic.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And when you talk about how the education, one part of it is awareness, right? And that's, I think, if I heard correctly, John SOCSO has been doing a lot of marketing on that front, kind of getting these emphasis out there, and I'm hoping that this conversation also plays a part in that, right? That we get more people to learn about these different things that they can do to get themselves more protected. Because of all the different elements in financial planning, I think insurance and protection is one of the ones that is most neglected, right? And I think they often say that insurance is a product that needs to be sold and it's not necessarily bought. And that really goes to the psychology behind it. We always think about how to make money and cash flow. Then we think about investing and how to get returns. And a lot of times maybe fall into certain scams. But the insurance, the estate planning, these are not things that people like to think about. And education is important, literacy is important. Sean, I'd like to go to you again, actually, and talk a little bit about on the GRAB front, what kind of programs or financial literacy or empowerment programs are you guys looking at in terms of educating the workforce, if at all? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, I don't think of it as just educating the gig economy, because the broader country could benefit from financial literacy. But when we think about our own platform or participants, we think of it as a spectrum. So there's the stuff that is so critical that you just have to have it. For us, that's personal accident insurance. So we have a group-wide, platform-wide personal accident insurance. It just covers everyone from the moment they start working. And that's just covered by default, right? Now, if you build on top of that, it starts to get into more and more discretionary topics, like what do I think is important to me and my family? So one level above that is very direct issues like personal accident on your family. And we have these kind of bolt-ons where they can upgrade their free personal accident insurance into a family package. So they just pay for the family. And then one level above that, as you mentioned, is actually the insurance and protection beyond personal accidents. So whether it's inability to work or even just like health insurance, that's where actually we start to really engage with partners. Because at the end of the day, the financial system, while it could do a lot more work to get products into the right shape and form for the gig economy, it is already pretty developed. But if anyone of you have ever bought insurance, and I haven't bought that much insurance, like my very few experiences were very challenging, honestly. Luckily, for our friends in Ringgit Plus actually kind of make it easier. But it's tough. And that's where, when we talk about education, it's not about educating people on how to think about stuff. It's educating people about the options they have available to them. And then when you go above that and you got all your basics covered, then we talk about investments and savings. And for that, we also work with partners to do this. So for example, we have partnerships with Microsoft around financial literacy. We have another partnership that we just announced recently with MasterCard. All these financial gurus to try and get people up to speed on that top part of the pyramid. But yeah, it's sort of like a spectrum of needs from basic to most advanced.
And I guess that's also where the accessibility becomes more important, right? And in terms of, again, I think we talked about this a little earlier, Francesca. It's great to have tools and we can talk about all these different things, but are they going to the people who need it? And I think that's where this upsurge in digital financial services over the last 2-3 years or so is becoming a very interesting topic, right? And yes, there will always be skeptics in terms of what's it actually going to cost to get there. Are there going to be trade-offs when you get something more, make something more accessible? But coming from my perspective, I think it's better to have a form of protection or a form of coverage for your investing for long term, even if it's not EPF, than having nothing, right? Because if you're not protected, it's binary, it's 1 or 0. I mean, yes, you can have some coverage, you can go to government medical facilities should anything happen to you, but again, you want to have something that can protect your income as well. Before we move on from Grab, I do want to ask Sean one more thing though. Have you seen an uptick in terms of adoption of different government programs from your own platform, Aisara and Kejaya Gig, all these different things? Have you seen? Has it been encouraging?
Yeah, very, very encouraging. So the EPF contribution has gone up. The one that's particularly successful is the Penjana Gig. Pretty much everybody's enrolled by default because we didn't really make it an option. We just enrolled everybody. I mean, it's free, just to again incentivize the right behaviors. I think the participation has been very good. And I think now our job is basically to build upon that, right? Remember, it's a whole spectrum of things. It's not just to focus on one thing, but really just to get people to level up across the whole spectrum.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear. What about you, Francesca? On your side, Go-Getters taking up all these different programs in addition to the programs that you are also doing on your end?
Yes, definitely. I think definitely a lot of really great, I guess, efforts and contributions from the government, because they definitely did make it a lot easier when we were going through tough times in COVID. When they rolled out Penjana Gig, it was basically just rolled out for all go-getters as well. And so it definitely, has been well adopted in that sense. I think the key is, how can we ensure that they are fully aware of what they have been given when they are going to go through a, unfortunate incident? Will they be able to know how to funnel and get help and ask help where they are provided that support, and making sure that after the incentive this time around, that they see the value and they'll take it on themselves. So I think that's the next challenge that we're looking at. In terms of our personal, our internal initiatives beyond the Penjana Gig, we've definitely seen a spike in adoption since the pandemic, because of a lot more income coming through the gig economy, of course. But then also we took this as an opportunity to really educate them about risk and mitigating it. So we also rolled out things such as, they're called bite-size comms, but essentially it's just short as like not even a full sentence, but it's even when they're in the app and they're looking at the job they're doing today, we actually go, do you want to buy your daily insurance today, like now? Because this is really important, right? And then we'll throw in a fact, like, and it's dynamic, so you don't get the same fact every day. So it'll be like, this is the chances of this happening if you don't do it, right? And we tend to find, ironically, the content that is around a little bit more of like, let's really showcase, it's unfortunate, but like the risk, and it's like quite a shocking like stat, then those are when actually the insurance purchases go up. So I do think there's definitely value in comms and knowing when to hit them at the right time. That's what they always say, right? Marketing is actually more about the timing and relevance than the actual content, right? So we try to really sell it at the point when it really is relevant, instead of say, hey, think about this when you do it in the future. It's like, okay, when you're really doing it right now, this is the time you need it. Buy your daily insurance, and it's as low as RM1, right, for a day. So and then it hits, right? So that's something that with the recent emphasis, we've seen a higher take up, and that's really helped. Yeah, so we hope to do more of these kind of education pieces.
And it's such a great way when we talk, that in itself is a great way of I'm losing words here, but utility of technology essentially, right? It's
Yes.
timed cues, right? It's when you need something, because when you don't need something and you can procrastinate on it, you push it aside and then you don't really think about it and you forget. But when it's a time sensitive thing, something that, oh, you know what, this really applies to me now, there is the take up, the retention rate is higher. And this is something that we're learning from all sorts of different, cues and utility of technology. But one of the key things, I think we've come to this, we addressed this a little earlier, but I think both you and Sean talked about it. It was basically starting, right? It's how do you start someone on this journey? And then that's basically where the biggest inertia is, because once someone starts something, then maybe they can build from there. And I think this was something you said earlier, Francisca. It was below a certain point of income, there isn't really much you can save, right? And this is where sometimes it's even just the act of saving, even if it's just RM1, triggers off a new routine path, right? And then eventually you can grow that with time. That's not a muscle that's typically exercised by a lot of Malaysians, even those with EPF access. In fact, especially those with EPF access, because that is already done automatically. So, but that's a whole topic for another day in terms of financial literacy. I'm sure it's going to be covered during this event. But I'd like to take, I think we've got about 15 minutes left. So I'd like to shift this, taking a look forward, right? And I'm really proud of the term I used earlier, modular economy, modular work. I think let's keep using that. But what this has signaled, and I think I alluded to this earlier, and you both have mentioned this many times, it's this lack of definition in terms of the income generation, right? It's not as clear-cut as I'm fully employed, and it's not even as clear-cut as I am self-employed entirely. We are seeing a hybrid, a hybrid coming together of these two different job sources, which is or multiple job sources. And this is where we're going to have to see more financial literacy and more financial education, more financial empowerment, because you cannot, especially in the long run, always rely on the top-down method for someone else to come and take your responsibility and your accountability. And yes, there are many challenges to it. I'm not trying to make it simplistic, but we are here to talk about financial literacy overall, and specifically we're talking about the gig economy, which is slated to get bigger and bigger as time goes on, either because people are moving into it or people are supplementing their income. So looking ahead, I guess, how do, particularly Sean and Francesca here, are we going to start seeing this become, the gig economy platform work, become more of a full-time endeavor, or is it always going to be a part-time temporary gig event? Is there basically, can we transition over to it being full employment, or is that an old way of trying, am I trying to fit a circle into a square peg essentially? Who would like to take this on first?
Oh, you know, when I was young, my parents said, like, when you grow up, you might get a job doing this, you might get a job doing that, right? Like, there's this concept that you'll have a job. And I think that's kind of the beauty of the gig economy, right? Like, it is, earlier I mentioned, it is a safety net. You have people, and these are real people I speak to, right? Like, you have people who got laid off and it's a fallback full-time employment. And then you've got people who are underemployed, as I mentioned earlier. You've got people who are just in between jobs. That's frictional unemployment, right? I was once in a car with a young uni grad who studied basically biochemistry. And I'm like, oh, so what are you doing now? And he says, well, I didn't want to just settle for a job that is not relevant to my field, like all my friends did. Because anyone can get a job if you try hard enough. But can you get the right job? Well, you have to be patient. So he's actually using driving as a way to tide himself over so that he can get the right job and then move into it. So there's so many applications to something as flexible as Roshan coined, the modular economy. And I think that there's something that's quite special. The income is pretty good. We are talking about people in M40 doing this full-time, people who are boosting themselves to M40 doing this part-time. I don't see why that would change. So I think it's time the industry evolves to match the economy rather than the other way around.
Yeah,
and
I think,
yep.
oh, I would just like completely agree with that in the sense of, I think I would describe what our platforms are. It's about flexibility and the dynamism that we create in that economy, right? That keeps them able to either use it like Sean said, in between jobs, but we actually have it for students in between semester breaks. It can be actually retirees when they are just wanting to keep busy. So in fact, actually also and I think that question even is slightly flawed, because we're also creating employment for those that unfortunately are not included in the full-time job employment economy because of either frictions in the labor market that can be caused from prejudice, location of where you live, to your education background, or to even the flexibility of your age. There's age discrimination, and then even the flexibility of the job to your schedule. If you're a mother and you want to have take care of your kids, 9-to-5 jobs sometimes are not the best for that. So then historically they've always been opted for, oh, I will have to be a stay-at-home mom. Today they could actually be involved in the economy, and for the first time we have options for them, right? So it's not even just, hey, is it full-time? Are they going to shift to part-time? It's, did you know that even there were people who couldn't be included in the economy and then now can get one, right? So, and then I would say also like, so it's flexible, dynamic, but actually inclusive, right? And then I do think the future, though, the definition of one singular employer to one employee is, it will still exist. I just think there will be a larger portion of the economy where you'll have multiple employers or job creators to a single individual. And it's going to be a lot more flexible, not just because of gig work, but because it's easier for you to also have a side business by creating a store on Lazada, and then you can sell, and then you get income there. And then you'll also be a social media influencer, or you could do so many things all at the same time. And therefore, income sources used to be singular relationship. you're just going to get multiple income relationships, I think.
Yes, Mr. John.
Yeah, I just want to add in a bit. Yeah, I agree with the other panelists, Sean and also Francesca as well, regarding this part-time or full-time workers, gig workers. In fact, Perkeso is encouraging employment in the gig economy through our initiative Kedaya Gig, announced under the Pemekasan package recently, where we provide work incentives worth 600 monthly for 6 months. So in other words, I think the total is about 3,600. So the policy objectives were to reduce the time-related underemployment situation as formal labor demands remain low during the COVID-19 pandemic. So many workers were forced into unpaid leave as companies are not producing at a full capacity. So the barriers of gig or platform economy in building sustainable long-term employment is mobility towards higher skill services, entrepreneurs activities. Although there is a higher employment opportunity in the gig economy, most of the gig employment in Malaysia, including those listed under major jobs, are related to repeated and low-skill labor tasks. So, in addition to social protection, employment services that are provided by SOCSO for such benefit recipients that are within our network can gain access to also as an active labor market program, actually AMP, Job Carnival, open interview sessions, and many more. So with the upskilling in between, the idea is to build portability between formal and the gig employment. Okay, Rushan?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, I think, to bring this kind. I think I don't think we're going to be able to package this with a nice little bow over it, but again, maybe also a bit cliched. It's about getting the conversation started. It's also just about emphasizing financial literacy, financial education, financial empowerment. I think the last part is really important, that accountability and responsibility that each of us has over our own financial lives going forward, especially as we go towards a more modular, more flexible kind of working environment, which seems to be the trend forward, right? That's not to say full employment is going to go away, but there are questions, let's just say, over the 40-hour work week, whether it's appropriate for the new industrial age we're in. It was born from 100 years ago. Does it still apply today? These are all different questions we're all trying to deal with, but self-employment or a hybrid self-employment seems to be a way for us to take that power back a little bit. And with that also comes the risk and all of that, right? And so we do have to talk a little bit about the concerns on that front, right? Because maybe to wrap up, because I know we've got less than 10 minutes left overall. So as we look forward, we want to encourage the growth of the gig economy. We want people to become more aware, more financially empowered. But on the flip side, there are going to be concerns. Things like, is it going to be enough income for me? Is there going to be a commoditization element, right? Because that's just simple labor economics, demand and supply. I guess it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and I'm not trying to make this a negative spin, but it is important to address these things from a long-term perspective. So what are your each, I guess, how do you respond to something like this? Some of the negative, maybe more negative thoughts, but also what are your own respective pressing concerns as we see the gig economy continue to grow as we've seen it so far? Who would like to take this? Is open to everybody. So, Mr. John.
Talking about the gentrification towards, from the gig workers. So for Perkeso, we have changed our approach to reaching out to them. So actually, it's not easy to persuade them to contribute to Perkeso for social coverage. So we have to do something extra, extra effort for them. Actually, just to inform you, we already had about more than 9,000 engagement with our gig workers. So including the e-hailings, p-hailings. So with that engagement, there are many types of engagement through social media, through television, through online, to other medium that we have. Even we have to go to the taxi station, to engage with them, to encourage them to explain to them about social security protection, especially about our self-employed protection under this SKSPS. So, in other words, other initiative we do is we have this what we call it Squad Prihatin, Squad Perkeso Prihatin, that we have this initiative to increase our outreach also on the ground. Our team would monitor various range of media, including WhatsApp, social media, and so on, for these vulnerable gig workers to ensure that they are protected. So cases involving those not eligible for CASO benefits are channeled through our network, about 190 social protection partners, including Welfare Department, AKPK, GetMara, MEMDEC, etc., for other and other forms of provision for social security protection. Actually, we did help them. Actually, in that process, we want to educate them, especially about financial. Actually, we work very closely with AKPK to educate those, especially the gig workers. Building upon that network, we established Sahabat Prihatin also as the application used among community leaders to channel potential cases to Picasso directly. They can even take pictures of cases and share it to us. Picasso is planning to expand this to public, so top-down and top-up channel for information. Actually, now we also engage with this Pusat Khidmat for Ahli yang Berhormat, ADUN or MPs, to directly engage with them and to explain to them about this initiative, about Picasso Prihatin, and also what we can do to help our self-employed, especially, and in particular gig workers. So that is the what we have done, Roshan.
Thank you, Mr. John. Sean or Francisca, who would like to take a stab at this first? We've got about 4 minutes left before we have to wrap up. I see Sean is unmuted.
Yeah, so when I think about what the gig economy or just overall digital economy has brought, it's this. We talked about the empowerment of people to work whenever they want, the inclusiveness. In the past, if you are a person with disabilities, it's not easy to just find income tomorrow. Today you can. And if you just lost your job and you really needed the income, today you can start earning in 7 days. It's something that's powerful and something that's inclusive, right? My biggest concern is that we don't fully get it, and then we just put in things that kind of destroys that. I guess, typical topic of regulations is always double-edged. Regulations can be really good and really powerful. It can also be, negative. And when we think about this economy, we got to find ways to protect people without destroying the thing that we're actually trying to protect, which is the income. Basically, we got to think about ways to help them without introducing any friction. Because if they are not even earning, then they're not going to be saving, they're not going to be spending on protection.
Very true. And sometimes I think a lot of us may be using old models for the new economy and all of that. Francisca, to wrap up, talk about the key concerns, pressing concerns going forward, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So to add something different than to the conversation for me would be, I think you asked, will it be big enough, right, for me to earn if I went to a gig economy? I think my main thing is always to think about essentially gig or full-time, it's a format, but it's based off the denominator industry, which is actually the labor market, right? So whether or not jobs are there, it's actually what format it takes form, what if format it takes form of, right? So whether it will come off as a few hours work distributed to the city, or whether it will come off as a full-time job distribution. So to me, the labor market will always be there. The employment and the GDP of the economy, of ensuring that our companies are running, that is the backbone of the economy. So it's not a question of will it be big enough. It's actually whether or not, my concern will be whether or not certain enterprises or SMEs are not going to be left behind, but will be supported to make that necessary shift where necessary to go into this new world digitally. Some SMEs are well positioned, and that's great. But we can't assume that all SMEs have received the same access to certain tools to digitize, because for you to use gig work or to take new forms of employment that's going to save your company costs or that's going to help you scale, you need to change SOPs, be aware to know how to digitize, be aware how to know access to certain applications and tools and technology, and sell your company in a different way using technology too. So we're all integrated, we're all plugged into this same economy. So I feel like for me, the concern will be whether or not we're ensuring there's also equal opportunities to the employers to upskill themselves to the new norm.
Francesca, a great point, I think, to wrap up this conversation on to the three of you, Sean, Francesca, John, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fascinating discussion. Maybe I'm just a bit nerdy, but I really, really enjoyed all these different aspects about this. So thank you again for joining me. This morning I had Mr. Sean Goh, Country Head of Grab Malaysia, Miss Francesca Chia, CEO and co-founder of GoGet, as well as Mr. John Riba, Deputy CEO of Perkeso, the Pertubuhan Keselamatan Sosial, on this webinar. And I'd like to thank all of you for your time this morning and for joining us in this webinar held in conjunction with the Financial Literacy Month 2021, which again, as I mentioned earlier, aims to provide financial education and support during this challenging time. Now, before you all go, be sure to participate in our pop-up quiz right after this session to be eligible for our amazing lucky draw prizes. Again, a little gamification never hurts. My name is Roshan Kanesan with Ringgit Plus Financial Planner, and it's been my absolute pleasure to be your moderator this morning. Take care, stay safe, and all of you have a great weekend ahead.